say it's been interesting is that I was expecting to be giving out more gifts this year, but I was actually able to give out less gifts, not because I'm a Scrooge for those listening, but it worked out that I guess because of everything that's going on, people expected less. So when you did give, it was like, oh my God, you're over delivering instead of just meeting expectations.
Oh, that's wonderful. Glad to hear that. Definitely. Yeah. I received quite a bit. I cannot complain here. My daughter was very nice to me and sending me more than one gift actually. So that was great. I was like, whoop, whoop, this is good.
I know. Can you imagine getting more than one gift? That's like twice the joy, isn't it?
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been good. It's been good. This holiday has been kind to me. I'm very grateful.
So, what are some of the things that you normally do during the holiday season?
Well, this time we went on a trip. We went on vacation and we love going to Las Vegas, actually. So we did that after quite a few years. And no, we don't gamble. We just watch shows and we like to eat, actually, do a lot of people watching. So that was very, very entertaining. And for New Year's Eve, we do absolutely nothing. We just, hey, go to sleep and see you next year.
I think people watching is the most underrated sport anyone can participate in. I love it.
I love it too. Love it too. I mean, if you're a fan of watching curious characters and be above and beyond, go to Vegas. It's definitely quite an experience.
I've been 3 times to Vegas, and each time I've enjoyed it. And the reason why I've enjoyed it is there's so much to do, and people think Vegas, you're gonna commit all these sins, you're gonna commit all these um things that you see in the movies, right? You like
Right.
if people who are getting married, they're like, okay, you know what, let me get this out of my system, and whoever I want to have that type of relationship with, I can because whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But I think the best part of Vegas as I got older was the shows. The shows are like truly amazing, and a lot of them are one of a kind.
Yes, absolutely. We have been to Vegas like, oh my God, like 5 times already, and it's always about the shows. Watching people is amazing, it's a great experience, but watching the shows is highly recommended and definitely the shows are there. There's a show called by Sig de Soleil that is a one of a kind show. I have watched it twice and I would watch it again, not a problem. And there's another one called Ka. There's the Beatles. There's so many. There's a comedy. There is yeah, adult only shows. And honestly, Vegas is not really for kids. Vegas is for adults, definitely. That is for sure. I saw way too many kids, and I don't know which one was more miserable than the next. That was crazy.
Look at
Sorry for the
Vegas.
kids.
No, no, I agree. I look at Vegas as Disneyland for adults,
Right, right. It's
right?
not
Like you,
it's not for kids. It is definitely not for
no,
kids. Hmm.
no, and I've seen Cirque du Soleil each time I've went there. It's truly amazing. I saw like a couple of dance shows. I've seen that.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I went to Vegas, a couple of people canceled and I was there by myself. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm here by myself. It's really going to be a good time. But because of the shows, I was able to see 2 shows a day because when you're by yourself, you don't have to compromise with anyone. You go where you want to go,
That's great.
right? The second night, I was wearing this Argyle sweater,
Yeah.
right? It was baby blue and white. I felt like I was the sexiest thing in the world wearing that.
Good
And
for you.
I know, right? I got a VIP seat. And you know what happened to me, Blanca? A woman spilled red wine
Oh man.
on it. And you know how hard it is to get red wine out of white.
Yeah. Oh man, that's
So
bad.
it was bad. And then the staff saw because I was in the VIP and they're trying to like help me out and clean it. They said they'll cover the dry cleaning. She turns around, she says, well, you can take it off and give it to the cleaners. I was like, I don't have anything right appropriate underneath. And then someone, I guess this guy and his partner, right, I'm guessing maybe his girlfriend or his wife,
Yeah.
he's like, do you think she did it on purpose?
Hey, who knows? Anything
It's
is possible.
Vegas. It's
Exactly.
Vegas, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah, yeah. They
it
say a
was
lot
kind of
that they say a lot that what happened in Vegas stays in Vegas, not anymore. what happens in Vegas goes straight to social media. So watch out what you're doing. You
I
may be
know, right?
surprised.
I
Yeah.
know. So today we're going to talk about a few things because you're an open book, I'm an open book.
Mhm.
And there's one thing I want to ask you was as I was going through some of your social medias, I saw the word or the phrase, I should say, wounded healer. What does that
Mhm.
mean? And explain that to our audience a little bit.
Wounded healers. We are individuals that we all this hard hardships and dark seasons that we experience in life, we use them as gasoline, actually, to help others improve their quality of life. And the concept of wounded healer dates back from the Greek era, from very, very ancient times. And it was the legend of a soldier that was hit by an arrow and he became a healer. So he was literally a wounded healer. And all the way back to this day, us wounded healers, yes, we have been broken in life. We have gone through the ups and downs in life, dark seasons, going down that rabbit hole, hitting rock bottom, getting out of the rock bottom, getting out of the rabbit hole, and really, really use these experiences as the biggest inspiration to help others in life. So that is what a wounded healer is.
And how does that apply to your life and to your journey?
It applies in every single way possible, I could say. I grew up with wonderful parents, and my parents, since I was a little girl, they I learned from them that helping others is a beautiful thing. That it's always good to help others, no matter where they come from, no matter what is happening to them. My father was a very successful businessman in New York City. He came from very modest beginnings in Puerto Rico. My mother comes from extreme poverty, actually, in Puerto Rico. And in the late 50s, early 60s, they moved to the US in search of the American dream. And it was this big exodus of Puerto Ricans back in those days to New York, specifically to New York City and Connecticut for something better, for something bigger. And my father, with a lot of hard work and dedication, he really conquered that dream. He became not only a business owner, he was the owner of the apartment building where we lived at. He was an owner of a pawn shop. He was an owner of a jewelry store as well. So he was heading into something really, really big in life. And the same way that he received the abundance, it was the same abundance that he will give. And he will always be sending money to all of his family in Puerto Rico. And oh boy, we had a big ass family. Definitely come from many brothers and sisters. From one side of the family, I had 26 cousins. So you can imagine the amount of people. Yes, a lot of people. And then my mother, coming from the extreme poverty where she didn't take her abundance for granted either. She was a very helpful human being and very giving, because the same way that she received help and support to get out of the extreme poverty that where she was at is the same support that she wanted to give. So definitely that is the rooting of helping others improve quality of life.
I know for me, when I hear something like that, I think of like my different relationships over the years, whether they're personal, whether they're romantic, or even at the job, the professional. And I think we suffer in so many different ways. And as you mentioned poverty and you mentioned these other, let's say, life lessons and life situations that we come in to. And then we understand that life isn't always the easiest and it's difficult in so many different ways. But
Mhm.
then when we triumph over it, we're like, wow, I can't believe I went through that. And then we're better prepared for the next challenge and the
Absolutely.
next one. Do you think maybe that is another way of looking at being a wounded healer, that you stand the test of time through the journeys that you've gone through in your different areas of life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that very good rooting that my parents provided for us, me and my siblings, really helped us for what was coming ahead, which was very, very difficult. My father lost his life. Well, his life was taken when he was only 43 years old in his jewelry store, and life was never the same again. It was, I mean, one day we were in abundance, love, stability, everything was wonderful. And the next day, everything was dark. It was horrible. It was uh, pain and suffering. It was confusing. I feel isolated. So, still trying to help as an 8-year-old girl that I was still trying to help my mother feel a little better. And it was the helper in me that was doing those kind of things. Who knows, maybe to forget a little bit about my own pain and suffering, or maybe to, I don't know, make her smile because she was always smiling and the smile just wiped out from her face for a very long time to come. And it was a very, very difficult, horrible time for me and my siblings. My father was killed, and after that, my mother was never the same again. She fell into a very deep depression and she never recovered from it. My mom had chronic untreated mental illness for the rest of her entire life, so to speak. She got the help that she deserved and needed when she was 79 years old. So I lived my entire childhood, the rest of my childhood, and I mean, and my whole adult life around my mother, that the poor thing, she did the best that she could with the little that she had, but still was very traumatic for us. It was very confusing. It was very isolating. My mother, her ups were up and the downs were horrible. So it was a very unstable environment, starting immediately after the passing of my father. Everything from being stable, rooted, with a great foundation, and a lot of consistencies and everything is like, wow, this is so good. It became a mess, a royal mess from the moment of his departure. So navigating through that as a little girl was not, needless to say, it was horrible, and I didn't know which direction my very young life was going at that point.
How do you think something like that impacted you later on in life as you reflect on how difficult that upbringing was?
Oh, definitely. It impacted me for the rest of my life, actually. I was researching not long ago about these very impactful moments from and what causes childhood trauma. And trauma is bad moments that have not been healed, that have not been dealt with in the proper way. And I was reading that two-thirds of all children from all over the world will suffer an impactful event by the time they reach 16 years old, whether it is the tragic passing of a loved one, being bullied by family members and or at school, or sexual assault. And I went through all three of these by the time I was 9 years old, living in a world of silence, because as an 8-year old that I lost my father, I always heard from my family, shh, you don't talk about the dead. You cannot talk about the dead because it's too difficult, it's too painful, when it should have been like the whole opposite. But you know what? Whatever the level of ignorance was at that time, definitely. And me as a little girl, an 8-year old, if I cannot talk about the dead, which was the worst possible thing that happened to me at that time, I cannot talk about bad things either. So all of these horrible things that happened to me, I mean, in a 1 year span, I kept it to myself because it was all shh, you don't talk about the dead, you don't talk about mental illness, you don't talk about mental health, you don't talk about feelings. She is a little girl, she doesn't understand. And that in my kid mind, I thought, well, if nobody wants to hear what I gotta say, is because I am not worth their time. So that's when I went straight down the rabbit hole of low self-esteem, low self-worth, and self-destructive patterns. And that followed me for most of my life, all the way to, I don't know, I could say almost my 40s. So that childhood trauma that went untreated for all of that time, it took me to many ugly, dark places that I threw myself in. I am responsible for all of my actions, but it was all about low self-esteem, low self-worth, not thinking that I was worth anybody's time, because starting with my own mother, I was totally isolated from her. And it wasn't me isolating myself from her. She isolated herself from everybody as a coping mechanism, whatever the case it was. But she, in her mind, it was all about, shh, you don't talk about these things, and pretend that everything is good. And it was never good. It was not good. It was, I mean, my mother was a very violent person. When she had her bouts of going through the down wasn't that she was crying or sad. The down was violent. So I grew up around that kind of violence. My father died violently. My mother went into violence herself. So of course, the generational, repetitive, vicious circle of violence, it was something that was making me company for a very, very long time. I had relationships with, especially the relationship that I had with the father of my kids was a very violent one. And it was infested with verbal, emotional, physical abuse. He was a drug addict. I had problems with drugs and alcohol myself. So you can see here the pattern of self-destructiveness where I was going through. And it was that, until I became a mother, that I said, okay, something has to change, because I ain't gonna end up, these kids are gonna end up without parents, because the path that my ex was following ended his life. He died at 48 years old. And I said to myself, I have to be the voice of reason for these kids. I have to stay, and I have to do something that is bigger than myself, a mission that is bigger than myself, and is be compliant, and find a way out of this. And with hard work, dedications, blood, sweat, and tears, it can be definitely achieved.
I think some people really downplay the impact of a poor childhood. And when I say a poor childhood, I don't mean that, well, mommy, I wanted that toy and you said no. I mean, like the violence, the neglect, the
Mhm.
emotional unavailability. I think a lot of people don't realize how it impacts you, because when you look at the adverse childhood experience, you see how many people who have had difficult childhoods live a life of being promiscuous, lead a life of joining gangs.
Right.
They don't have the certain level of respect for authority. And one of the worst things that I think that comes out of that is that they don't have the respect that they should have for themselves,
Right.
right? And they
Mhm.
abuse their bodies in ways that maybe they
Mhm.
shouldn't be abusing their bodies. So you have people that they get into these types of relationships where if there's abuse in their childhood, there's abuse in their relationship, because their baseline, their normal is that I
Yeah.
grew up in this. This is what I know. Let me go seek it, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And
Right.
then when they get caught up in it, they're like, oh my goodness, I've
Mhm.
become my mother.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've become my father. And then when they have children, how are they going to understand that, okay, I need to raise these children better than maybe I was raised, but then maybe they catch themselves doing things that remind them of their parents,
Right.
right?
Right.
Was your experience one where you went through this, you understood some of the choices you made, but
Mhm.
were you surprised that you found yourself in that situation? Or was it totally, you know what, I kind of expected this because I knew what I went through and I knew that I was unhealed at that point?
Well, this is the thing. When we are beings of habit, and we either go around a habit that has been instilled in us or within us for a very long time. And I was in a comfort zone, and comfort zones are not comfortable at all, especially when it comes to living around violence, around neglect, around people being emotionally absent, just like you said. We think that this is the normal thing, but when you start surrounding yourself in environments that are totally the opposite from what you live, there's some rethinking here. It's like, wait a minute. I've been around this all of my life, and I thought it was the normal, and I thought it was, so to speak, the right thing, which was it was never the right thing, because I always deep down in my heart, starting, here, this is when untreated childhood trauma, it takes over in such massive ways, because when I experienced all this trauma of sexual assault, abandonment, my mother being emotionally absent, my father's violent death, and me trying to navigate and understand grief, which I didn't know what grief meant. I didn't know the stages of grief. Nobody told me anything. Nobody gave me support. Everybody was silent because it was the best way to go. I I stayed in that rabbit hole for a very long time. And thank goodness that I found a way to surround myself with nice people. That's the irony of things. Something that I really yearned for and was really looking forward to have through the eyes of others. I was and just like you said, I was jumping from person to person to person to person. I was very promiscuous. I was partying a lot. And all came down to one thing. I was numbing myself and numbing myself and numbing the pain over and over and over. And yes, I was what you can call the functional junkie, because I went to school, I became a professional, I had my own apartment. I was like in that aspect, I had a facade of my life is good, I have it all figured out. But when that little glass wall will calm down, it was a whole different ball game. It was this little girl curling up in a fetal position, being lost and scared, and that was my story. And when we are definitely beings of habit, and it takes 21 to 67 days to build a new habit or let go of one. And in many cases, it takes much longer than that if the habit is rooted in the way it was rooted on me, the habit of violence, neglect, absence, all of these things. And to get out of that vicious circle, it took hard work, dedication, saying to myself deep down inside, I think I deserve more. And when I became a mother, that I saw those two little kids, that they have so much potential, they can do so much better with their lives. I said to myself, am I gonna keep on being my mother? Am I going to raise my kids like my mother raised me? Or what am I going to do about it? And that's when I said to myself, okay, I don't want to be like my mother. And I've been like my mother for so long. And that was a very hard one to accept, because this is the thing. When we are rebellious about mom, when we are in the hating mode, when we are at war